Good night and welcome to Animal Talk. Tonight being our final program for 2024, and I would like to use this program to again highlight some pertinent and important issues as we prepare to delve into the festive season. And as we know, it's a season of excessiveness where people eat plentifully and drink the same. It's a year where times we let down our guards as it relates to some of the usual practices or activities that we would indulge in. It's a time when we, like I say, we try to get closure to the old and roll over into the new. And in so doing, it's a time where people get geese, and sometimes those geese are pets, furry friends, new introduction into the homes. Many a times, these are persons who are experiencing being a furry family parent for the first time, and many a times not too sure as to what they should or shouldn't do. Tonight we're going to delve into some pointers as it relates to those persons who are welcoming furry friends, families into their household. Some of you be first-time parents, some of you may not be first, but again too, there are some tips that I think would go well for you if you would implement them as you prepare for your friend coming home. With areas of vaccination, we want to make sure that your furry friend is protected from the diseases that would be most likely affecting them, the diseases that they would be most likely be sensitive to and can contract, and don't have the immunity to fight those diseases. They could succumb to them, and your end point could be death. So it's important that your new entry be vaccinated. And for those of you who may not have entries, have puppies nevertheless, just remember that you follow the protocol for vaccination, that they should have received 3 vaccines in a 2-month period. So those of you who are missing to complete your protocol, please do so. Okay, for your first timers or persons who will be having puppies for the first time, to make sure that the pup or puppies are vaccinated, dewormed, and before you take them home or upon receiving them, make sure that they are vaccinated and dewormed, at least having the first vaccine. If that has not been done, make sure you get it done at the soonest. This would help to save you the loss of a furry friend and to save your furry friend a complete detachment, departing from its parent. So the responsibility is yours. Make sure that that doesn't happen. 2, the feeding of this furry friend. Again too, it's the Christmas season. We will have food in abundance, and you may want to feel you could feed anything, anyhow. Be mindful of this. Your ham and sausages and other processed meats or food would or could contain high levels of salt. So be mindful that when you're exposing your puppies, or not just puppies, your furry friends, to those foods, be very moderate in what you feed, because you don't want to feed excessively. If you do, you could intoxicate or poison your puppy by taking in food that is too high in salt. Okay. Again, to make sure this that you serve in moderation. During that time, we have a lot of gifts being served, and sometimes chocolate is plentiful in the household during that time of year. So again, be very careful as to not letting your furry friends, your puppy or adult, access to chocolates that they may ingest excessively. That doesn't mean that much, because too much of chocolate can be toxic to them. Again, too, it's a time of excessive foods. So foods that are, you'd have foods that are very highly seasoned. Again, too, don't feed excessive to your furry friends or your dogs. Some of them may be to eating spicy foods. That may not cause a problem. Some of them may not be, and that can cause a problem. So be mindful of this. Make sure you have water available, fresh water, throughout the day. If you're feeding, make sure those of you who will be taking your furry friend to your vets, that they will give you some guideline as it relates to the breed and size and weight of the puppy, so your feeding is not excessive. The introduction of that puppy to that household, again, it's Christmas time. You would have lots of Christmas decorations, electrical wires all over the place. Make sure that the puppy don't have access to those wires, because they could go chewing at them, and that can electrocute them or cause a fire. Decorations on the trees, make sure that the areas where your decorations are, they don't have full access to, or if they have access, it's controlled. So there's somebody providing some level of supervision. So you'll be making sure that they would get attracted to the decorations and want to interact with them. So you make sure that that interaction is supervised and they don't get themselves into trouble. The other foods that we should be mindful of, your fruits, grapes, you can feed to your puppies or to your furry friend. Just make sure that the seeds are not fed to them, because the seeds would contain a substance called cyanide, which is highly toxic, very poisonous, and if they consume, it can intoxicate, it can poison them. Yeah. Some dogs, believe it or not, are attracted to alcohol. They love alcoholic beverages. So again, be careful during that. You don't have drinks exposed in glasses on the floor where they can access and indulge and intoxicate themselves. I've seen it happen before, especially with those milky drinks. So be very careful of this. As we speak on the issues of poisoning, I would advise persons, those of you who may be lactose intolerant and do not use milk, I would advise you that you keep some milk on hand to be used in the event of an emergency. If you suspect any intake of any poison or the animal exhibiting any signs that you think it may be poison, please give as much milk as you can at the time that you observe it, and then you seek veterinary assistance. That intervention can make a significant difference as to whether your puppy, your family friend survives or not. Very important. Milk. Secondly, you could make sure you have a stock or stash of charcoal tabs. And again, that can be used. If you don't have access to chocolate tabs, you can get the charcoal, grind it as fine as you possibly can, stock it away. In the event that you notice or you observe animal exhibit being toxic, being poisoned, you could mix some of this, a tablespoon based on the size of the animal or two, with some water, spray down the throat. What that would do, the charcoal is very porous, meaning that it has a lot of tiny holes in there, and it is heavily charged with both positive and negative ions, which is the base for any toxin. It could be an acidic or an alkalinic base toxin. So the charcoal and the milk have that ability to attract whichever of these charges in there, to provide the opposite of it. It locks it in, and it prevents that poison from taking effect. Yes, so please, very important, people, make sure, and not just for the Christmas season. We say Christmas because the possibility of an animal being poisoned, and it may just be accidentally, not deliberate, but poisoning anyway, that you have milk stock just for that possible intervention, and charcoal in the form of tablets, or you could use the charcoal and grind it very, very fine, so you could apply it and get the same effect. Okay, after you've done that, then you seek the attention of a veterinary professional. That can make a significant difference as to your furry friend surviving that event of intoxication or poisoning. I'd like to have a little off here too. Not just the issue of the furry friends, persons who have pigs in the backyard, and they may want to use whatever they would have used of the hams, in preparation of the ham. Yes, after they've been boiled, they would feed the water to the pigs, even to the dogs as well. And that is very high in brine, salt. That could poison the animal very easily. So be mindful of this as well. Again, like I said, it's in moderation. If you want to use it to add taste to your food, you can do that, but please moderately, not excessively. Yeah. It can be present itself in the form of food, and that is now it's increasing the incidence of animal consuming foods with marijuana. That is increasing. So again, be mindful, and those of you who may indulging with candies and other pastries, goodies with marijuana, that's be careful that you don't leave it exposed or feed them with it, or they might feed themselves and feed excessively. They can be intoxicated as well. So again, be mindful of this, that you don't expose them to. Some of you may want to indulge, but don't do it excessively that it would affect them or It's your choice. I can tell you what to or what not to do. Just do it moderately so you don't create any state of intoxication to them, because it's a very, very easy way of they being poisoned. Again, so if a substance that is in there, or that the same effect that it has on you, it has on them as well. Be mindful of this. We now prepare ourselves for the festive of the season, where we have the use of those explosives that terrorizes those animals big time. Yeah. Some of you would have had the history before, so you know that your furry friend is very afraid of those explosives. So be mindful of this. You can help them in a number of ways. One, keep them close to you during that expected episode. Two, can get them into a dark room where that may help, or a room where you close all the windows to minimize the penetration of the sound, or the contamination of the sound into that environment. You can also assist them by seeking assistance through your vet in getting sedatives to sedate them. So you sedate, you numb them, that they are not too conscious of what is happening, so they will not react in a manner that they have been fearful of, and they may just get scared, get out of the room, out of the house, onto the highway, and we have had incidents of animals being lost as a result of this. Yes. So if you know that you have a history of your furry reacting to all of those explosives, those loud noises, please, so you can take precautionary measure to try and mitigate the effects of those sounds. Yeah. Again, too, it all has to do with how your furry friend was socialized. This is the time where you would have quite a few visitors visiting home, and based on how your furry friend is or are socialized, that can determine the response that they would give to persons at that time of year frequenting the house. Not only that time of year, but I guess increase in visitors, and if they will not socialize properly, they can be an embarrassment to you. So if you have any idea as to how they may respond to persons coming in, or the number of persons, the influx of persons coming in, try and introduce them early so they get used to the frequency of persons coming in. If you know that there's a level of aggression that they may exhibit or they have done before, be very cautious, keep them away as much as you can, so to minimize any conflict between them and the persons in their space or spaces at any given time. Yeah. So that's some of the guidelines that we have for our furry friends as it relates to the foods. People, be very careful that you don't overindulge and create problems for you. Yes. So if they are not used to certain foods, don't give them too much as you introduce it. Make it gradual so it doesn't pose a gastric problem for them, which turns out to be a problem for you. Yes. So please, moderation. And again, remember to keep stock or some milk in the event that there is any poisoning, charcoal tablets, and your charcoal powder. You can use the same charcoal, grind it up as fine as possible, and you can use it to counteract if you suspect any poisoning with your furry friend or furry friends. Okay, and again, keep them away from your electrical wiring, the wires for your Christmas trees, and so if they are in that area, it's been supervised, or make sure the are placed in a manner that they cannot access it, and to cause any accidents, fire. They can be electrocuted as well by biting those wires. Okay, be mindful of that. I want to bring into the fore before the issue. I'm not sure if some of you may have heard it, of the bird flu, which is scientifically known as the strain H5N1 that has been related to as the bird flu. It is causing some serious concerns in the US in particular, and maybe some other countries, but particularly so the US. The spread of that disease is in excess of 35 different states in the US, causing some serious concern, and more so the spread of the virus. It's a virus from the two main sources, which is the wild birds or the domestic poultry, which could be turkey or chicken or ducks that are grown domestically, commercially for food. And the persons who are interacting directly with those two the wild birds and the domesticated poultry, there are cases of they being infected with the virus. The good thing is now the symptoms are very mild. I don't think anybody has died from it. But what is interesting is that the birds are now serving as a source of infection to dairy cows. Interesting, dairy cows. So we've had in excess of 500 dairies being affected in the US. Majority of them being from California and Washington, yeah. And those dairy that are infected with the bird flu, the persons who attend to them are at high risk of being infected by the virus. Okay? At the moment, the CDC in the US, there is an advisory that all dairy farms in the US must be tested for the bird flu, the avian influenza virus, H5N1, because it's spreading and spreading at a very rapid rate. We don't know where this is going to end up, but it is of concern, and I'm saying so too that we be very cautious, and those of you who may not have been, to start following those events out as they are play, because they have consequences for us as well. Don't forget, a large of our food supply and source is out of the US. So if their food are being affected, that means our food also is being affected, because our food security is very porous. It's not stable at all. So we may find ourselves in a situation that we can't feed ourselves. So basically what I want to employ here is that people, I would like to see especially now, we think that everything foreign is the best, not necessarily so. You in a lot of meats, make sure that the meats that you indulge in is local. Yes. Your poultry here is second to none in the world, whether you want to believe it or not, but this is a fact. And we tend to turn up our nose on our local production. You have a premium product, right? Yes. So the point I'm making here is Christmas season. We're going to be indulging extra, and again to those meats. Yes, people stick to your local meats. Yes, I can guarantee you that's a healthier option to what you may be purchasing from the imports. Yes, what we have is what they're craving for, and we don't appreciate what we have. Yes, so I'm advising you, please, with all what's happening there, and we coming into the new year, I think this is a position that we would have to take on seriously. Our food security. We had an experience with COVID. Everybody was into production, and as soon as the restrictions for COVID was uplifted, everything else went through the window, went back to square one. Yes, people. I think we should take stock of this, be mindful of what is happening out there, and we shouldn't find ourselves in the position that we did with COVID, for our pants down, when we had to depend, and we are still depending on the next cargo boat that comes into the harbor to bring in our food for us to consume. Yes. The level of our non-communicable diseases, diabetes, hypertension, cancer, these, it's known, it's documented, yes, that the high level of incidence that we're having of prevalence of those conditions is as a direct result of the foods that we consume. A lot of foods with high level of salt, high level of sugar and preservatives, and this is impacting negatively on us. And sometimes the smell of the food tastes, we don't have the ability to walk away from it, and so we'll knowing fully well that it will affect us. Yeah. So please, if we let us start developing that consciousness now, and we're moving into the new year, we'll make resolutions for the new year. Make this your resolution for the new year, that you would consume foods, less foods, or zero foods, that is. And again, it's time that we start taking health issues in our hands and making the demands as to the foods that is accessible for consumption here. Because we don't realize it, that again, like I said, the high level of salt, sugar, and preservatives in those processed foods are one of the number one, well, effectively, yes, factors that contribute to the high incidence that we're having of diabetes, hypertension, and cancer, people. So if we can make a deliberate effort to try and reduce this, and I mean, if we are so conscious of our health and serious about our health, we can start making demands that the foods that are being imported, the values of those ingredients in there should be at a minimum level, so not to create those or give rise to those high incidence of those disease conditions that I just mentioned. Your lifestyle also contributes to it, but these ingredients in your foods are significant factors that contribute to the high level of prevalence that we are facing in this country. Yes, and that is affecting everything. It affects it's a drain on our healthcare system. It affects significantly the level of productivity, the level of absenteeism is high in the workplace as a result of people. Monies that are going into the management, treatment, and care of those conditions could have been directed elsewhere. Yes. St. Jude's, OKAU. If we had taken the necessary precautionary measure in our primary health care system so as to minimize the occurrences of those diseases by taking appropriate measures, yes, the millions that have been spent in infrastructure could have been spent more effectively within the health system, and we could have had a better health system. Yeah. So I am calling on you for your New Year's resolution. Make that your New Year resolution, yes, and to reduce the level of salt, sugar, and preservative in the foods that we consume. And take it to the policymakers, yes, make the demands that those imported products with those ingredients in there, the values be reduced. If we can do that next year at that same time, I'm sure I will be able to communicate to you, or not even me, you will have seen it yourself, that there is a reduction in the prevalence of those 3 disease conditions that I mentioned, and that would reflect directly into the increase in the economic activities in this country, the quality of life would have been increased, the level of productivity would have been increased, and the level of absenteeism reduced significantly. Yeah. So, with this, again, we're approaching the Christmas season. I know the Ministry of Agriculture, in collaboration with the Ministry of Health, will have their ante-mortem and for persons who would be indulging in slaughtering their own meats for Christmas, not traditional butchers, but some persons, families around that time of year, part of the festive season, would indulge in and do their own slaughtering, or groups of friends come together, purchase animal or animals and slaughter for consumption to be shared among themselves for the season. So I'm saying to you, look out for I'm sure by now the dates should be, if not, you could call the Ministry of Agriculture at Union 468 5620, 46856212223, and for information relating to where you're located and when that service will be available to you. So one would be the ante-mortem. The Ministry of Agriculture and veterinary staff would be out there examining those animals that you would have had or intended to slaughter for the season. That is normally done the day before the animal is to be slaughtered, to make sure that that animal is fit for consumption. Yeah. So the animal is free from diseases. The animal is not pregnant. The animal is not undergoing treatment where there may be high levels of antimicrobials or antibiotics or other drugs in there that would affect you if you consume the meat with such high levels. So to make sure that doesn't happen, so you have your ante-mortem inspection being done. If the animal passes the fitness for slaughter, you'll be issued a certificate. So the person who is going to come in to do what you call post-mortem inspection, which is done after slaughter, to make sure that the meat itself is wholesome, is fit for consumption. So if you cannot provide that slip of antemortem, that can pose some problems for you, especially those persons who are slaughtering for commercial purposes. Yes, and again, this is to make sure that the meats that are being consumed are wholesome meats that are being consumed. So again, to people, those of you who will be indulging in your slaughtering of your own meats for Christmas, please check the authorities. The number for Vieux Fort, I'm not sure, since they moved from Beauchesneau to Volette, but you could take in that number, 718-3926. That's the senior officer at the location, Mr. Melchor. I'm sure he'll be able to guide you accordingly. What date that and time that the antemortem will be carried out, and to be followed up by your postmortem. There's the number of practices that we need to be mindful of, again, as we delve into the festive season, in the preparation of foods. Those of you who are preparing warm foods to be served, make sure that the temperature of those foods are kept warm. And the reason for this is that to minimize the production or the proliferation of bacteria in those foods that can cause problems for persons if they consume. If the foods that you are preparing are cold, to be served cold, make sure that those foods are kept cold after you prepare to the point of it being served, so that temperature does not go up where it can cause the proliferation of bacteria that could be harmful, detrimental to persons consuming those foods. So as a guide, just be mindful of this. If it is hot, you keep it hot for up to the point where it's going to be consumed. If it is warm, you keep it warm. So you don't allow the temperature to go down or to go up if it is cold. If it is prepared cold and it goes up, the change in temperature can cause an increase in bacteria production. They reproduce very, very quickly. So you'll be surprised. So especially if you're using foods laced with things like mayonnaise and eggs and shellfish and that kind of thing, be very careful, people. And again, too, if the food is intended to be served hot, is prepared hot, please keep it warm, so at least the temperature is not drop too low where you have bacteria proliferating. And if it is cold, like your salads, or foods that are supposed to be cold, make sure that the temperature between the time it is being prepared and is being served is kept in that range, so the bacteria does not reproduce. If you don't want an increase in temperature for those foods, that can cause problems for you down the road. Yeah, consuming, some persons are more tolerant than others, and you don't want an embarrassment on your hands where people have consumed your food fall sick because bacteria reproduction in there cause food poisoning. We don't want that. Yes, already AKU is already overloaded, so we don't want you want to find yourself in a position where you get there and you cannot be attended to. So please be very mindful of this, that you keep, again, the foods that you prepared as hot foods, the temperature remain warm enough that it does not allow for bacterial reproduction. If it is cold, your salads and foods of that sort, that the temperature remain as low as possible, so it doesn't cause an increase in temperature and proliferation of bacteria to cause problems for you. Yeah. The festive season, like I said, we're going to have, it's a time for where the excesses proliferates, persons indulge in excessive drinking, excessive eating, partying, whatever it is that is the event or activity of the moment. Yeah. We should be very, very mindful as to the foods that we will be consuming. And don't take this thing lightly. A lot of these processed foods carry, and if you read the label, you will be surprised the level of concentration of salts, sugar there is in those foods and the preservatives. Those high levels of salt and sugar in there, one is the ratio in which it's being used, how it is being applied to the product, helps to enhance your palatability to that food, in that it creates a desire for you to want more of it, and again because of the ratio of these two ingredients, the preservatives that will be added in there to increase the shelf life of those foods. People, these have very dire consequences on us. So there will be, I know for sure, harm going through the window for the season. Be mindful of the amount of ham that you consume. A lot of these hams in the preparation and the brine that they prepare into is a high level of salt, sugar, and those nitrates, those preservatives they have in there. These products affect in a very, very serious way our health. Yeah. And I'm saying so, it may be coming through one ear tonight and going through the other. But people, I think it's time that we start to pay some attention to the food that we consume. And not because we walk through a door and the table is laden with all different menus that we just indulge, not realizing what is it that we are consuming. Yes. I said so at the beginning of the program. I'm going to say it again. We have a local product here, or products here, which is our meat products. And I'm going to name them for you. Our chicken eggs, our poultry meat, beef, pork, goat's meat, lamb, rabbit, people, the fish. The fish, I cannot speak too much of it because it's a wild harvest. We don't control the production of fish out in the sea, except for those that we grow on land within the aquaculture perspective. That has a certain level of control in its production. But the wild catch, there is no control in there. So we have very little control as to what those fishes would consume. But the terrestrial protein that I speak of, which is the poultry, the pork, the beef, the goat, lamb, rabbit. These are high quality meats that we have here, and we don't realize that, and we go buying cheap stuff that has been imported and that is causing tremendous detriment to our health, and we don't understand that. Some of those products may be, not all the time, may be cheaper at the supermarkets, but I've always said that we need to be mindful when it comes to what we buy. We know sometimes it's a difficult decision to take, especially when their purchasing power is so minimal that they don't have much of a choice. Yes, they're just really trying to get means of protein to serve on the plates of within the household for their family and friends. Yes, we understand that. And this is where we call it the scenario where we're cutting our nose to spite our faces. And this effort that we need to make here is a collective one. The choice may be individual, but the efforts that we need to make is collective. Yes. The local chicken, the price may be a slight differential in costs, but one thing I think we should be mindful of, I know it may be a difficult sell to you right now, but be mindful of this. What is it going to cost you if you will, with whatever means there is, to try and eat healthy? I know it's a challenge where you have large families, the economic resources extremely low, and you have children to feed, children to serve, you have house rent to pay, and the list goes on. But, and as I said, it's a collective decision that we have to make as a country, in that the price of the local products, like I said, may be a little higher than what is imported. But the difference in that cost, let's consider this an investment in health. Yes? Because the low price that you're willing to pay for that product, I can understand the whole economics of it. That's what you can afford. You want to buy meat, so whatever meat that you get, you will buy. You're going to buy chicken backs with imported, if all the fat, as far as you're concerned, is chicken. You bring it home as chicken, yes. But 50% of that chicken backs you have there is just fat. Yes, that is detrimental to you. To the animals you may want to feed that chicken backs. Yeah? What is it going to cost you as a result of giving a response to the destruction, the degradation of your health by consuming that cheap meat? Would be so much more than what you would have spent in buying a superior quality meat that would get you away from those gates of OKEU and St. Jude's as a result of the destruction that you would be causing to yourself by consuming those low quality meats in particular, or meat products, or processed products. People, this is, and we may just take it lightly, but this is very serious, very serious. Yes, the amount of persons who are on the waiting list and the dialysis chairs numbers are so much. Yes, and as a result of conditions that gave rise to them having to be on dialysis. And these conditions as a result of the choice that we took in consuming. Many times we can blame the consumers. The consumer will consume the foods that they have access to, the food that are available, and that is where they can reach. So, and that's why I'm saying it's all of us, because it has to be our concerted efforts from the policymakers down to making sure that we address health holistically. And I keep on saying so repeatedly on this program. We need to embrace the One Health concept if we are serious in anything we want in this country. Yes, the issue of standards. We have the Bureau of Standards in there, preparing standards day in, day out. Yes, and the majority of those standards are voluntary standards. And I don't like it, but that's fine. But that's my take on this. That those standards should be compulsory standards. Yes, and there are ways of getting it done to make it compulsory, because adopt and implement the standard set in the things that we do, we can as well forget it. Yes, and here's the reason why there is so much degradation in every aspect of life here in this country, because the standards are not being adhered to. People do things when they want, if they want, and there were no consequences to it. Yes, so if we are serious about making those changes, it has to be done. The policies has to be applied, and the standard aspect of it has to be implemented, people. Yes, it's a lot that we can do for ourselves, to help the change for ourselves. And if every one of us would have made that conscious effort, we will see a complete transformation as it relates to every aspect of this economy. Yes, there'll be less money for government to spend for healthcare. The health system would be running as a smooth machine. The level of productivity will increase tremendously. The level of absenteeism at schools and the workplace will reduce significantly. Yeah, people. So we need to start, and I'm begging you that the place that we can start to make that significant change, yes, is for us to be conscious of the food that we eat, especially those processed foods with the high levels of salt, the levels of preservatives and sugar. Yeah. I remember during the course of this year, there were a number of times where, sorry, you got on the line. Sorry, I didn't mention it. Oh, yeah, it's on. That there was a shortage of sugar, and people were going berserk because they couldn't understand why there is a shortage of sugar. And I honestly, some persons may not like it, but I'm going to tell you, I think we should have more of those events more frequently. Yes, to people understand that the level of sugar that we're consuming in this country is much too high, and this is contributing in a very significant. Yes, the high incidence of cancers, the high incidence of hypertension and diabetes, that is causing havoc in this country. And we have not come to our senses to realize that it's our taste buds that is driving us faster and closer to the coffin and to the tomb. Yes. So if we can sit back and in a very conscious way, yes, make those efforts of reducing the amount of sugars that we have. I personally don't buy locally produced juices because I find they are far too sweet. Yes, all you taste is just the sweetness in there. You don't even taste the flavoring of the fruit in there. Yeah. And we need to be careful. We see those ads on television, on social media, carried away, and we feel that the tasty foods, and again, it is the level of sugars and salt and the preservatives in there is disguised. It is presented in a manner to do just this, to drive you towards it, to crave for it, yes, because you feel it tastes so good, yes, and you've been blended, not realizing that in that blend, in that what you think to be so heavenly as it relates to the taste, that whether you want to accelerate your ascendant to heaven by consuming those, I don't know, but please, you can get to heaven without increasing your intake of those. We make a concerted effort, and I'm saying in all of us, and that comes from the policymakers right down, and we need to be serious about that. That the policies that are in place to help restrict the access of those foods and the foods that is more beneficial to us. Yes, we need to find creative ways to have those foods available and accessible. Our food security, like I said, is very porous. You look around, there's almost no food these days. And those foods that are available, the price is so high that persons cannot access it. Yes. And that's what I talked about, the accessibility of foods. So when we talk about food security, it's not just having the food availability, yes, but the important aspect of that security is the accessibility. That persons can access it. It's a price that is affordable, because it's available and the price is too high, they cannot reach it. It makes no sense. So, as I'm saying, it has to be a collective effort, people. The whole idea of being disciplined and adopting standards, if we want to be in a better place next year, which is not too far from here. Today's what, the 7th. So we have less than 25 days before next year surfaces. And if it comes next year, it's only going to be about today. So we need to be serious enough to make that decision now as to where we want to be. Because if not, next year, if we don't step in to make this one of the resolutions for 2025, we will be in a very bad state at the very same time next year. If all what's happening there globally, we speak of food security, but I think it's a lot of lip service. We're not putting our backs to the wheel to drive the vehicle of food security in the direction where it should be driven, on the path that it should be driven. Yes. So again too, I'm saying, if we are serious and conscious of ourselves, of our health, in fact, more persons speak of or are more conscious of their health now, but I think some of the practices that we need to implement and engage in, some of those health practices, making significant changes to the palates of our kids. This is significant. We keep saying that, oh, the children don't eat this and they don't eat that, or they rather Kentucky and pizza, all this junk, macaroni. Yes. Why? Simply because we have not taken time to prepare those foods in a manner that would attract the palate of those kids. And this is the direction that we need to go. The very same way that attracted to those foreign foods, yes, because of the taste, we can prepare our local foods in a manner to create that very same desire that they would want to consume it. Yes, to change their palates. So they may consume it not even realizing what they have consumed. We can do it. And again, too, it has to be a concerted effort of everyone, from the policymakers down. And I'm hoping that they're hearing this, because this is serious. Because all we're doing here is spinning top in mud, and we're doing things in isolation. It has to be a holistic approach if we want to be serious about changing. And again, too, the One Health perspective, this is where we need to go in applying the policy decisions that has to be taken, and be bold enough to take them. The standard sets that has to be in place and implemented to make sure that those standards are upheld. Is as a result, and I keep on saying, in that we do not uphold our standards. If we were to do that, people would have been in a better place today. Yes. So the interventions that we take to resolve some of these issues, and many times we believe it's monetary, and many times it's not part monetary, but there are a lot of other aspects of it that are not implemented. Yes, good evening, caller.
Hello, good evening, Doctor. I missed the beginning of your program when you spoke about the the bird flu.
Yeah.
Were you suggesting that we ensure what we eat with regard to chicken, etc.? Can you just give us a few seconds of what you were saying with regard to being on the lookout?
Okay, what I was saying with the issue of the bird flu.
I'm going to listen.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah, is that the disease has now, it's spreading and it's moving to other species. Yes. In the US, there are in excess of 30 to 35 states that are affected with the avian flu. Yeah. Persons now, the amount of persons now being infected is increasing. And again, too, the persons who are in direct contact with the birds, workers on those farms. And what has happened now? Now they're finding that the virus is now being it's not present in the milk. Okay, so the point that I'm making there, so we don't know which other species that is going to move into. It's very likely that it can be the swine industry, the pork, because we know that the pork, the pigs, has the receptors for both the human influenza and the bird flu. So the fear has always been that the pig would serve as the factory that would be able to merge those two viruses and to have a superbug developing. So the point I was making is that we need now also too the CDC has made it compulsory that all dairy establishments has to be tested for avian influenza. Okay, so the majority of our foods come from US, so that is tainted in there will be recipients of it as well. So the COVID is a red flag that we should be mindful of our food security and how porous it is. And we have moved into a mode where we think that everything is fine and we're back to normal again. People, we should be very mindful, and the point I'm making there is time that we be aware of these occurrences outside and how it will affect us, and don't wait for it to affect. We need to start putting in place measures to address our food security. Making a conscious effort individually as to the foods that we eat, because all of those imported foods plays a significant role and factor in the escalation of diseases like cancer, hypertension, and diabetes. Yes, a lot of those foods that we consume are very high in salt, sugar, and preservatives. Yes, and we don't realize that, and the consumption pattern that we have adopted and the kids are adopting is driving along those ways. The foods are very attractive, very palatable. The ratio that they use in sugar and salt and the preservatives, and we're not aware of this, delving head-on in consuming those foods. So that I'm getting to is that we need to make a conscious effort in addressing the food that we consume, and the policymakers come down the way should make an effort in putting in measures to address this. Some persons, it may be difficult, it will be a challenge, but I think it's necessary that we go this way. If not, next year, this time, we'll be in a far worse situation than we are today. So, caller, this is what the preamble to what you may have missed. We're getting to the close of our program tonight, the last for the year, and presenting this program that I know every year persons make resolutions for the new year. Collectively, we can make this a resolution for the new year. Individually, home, to the community, and to extension, the country. And that everyone should be on board with this, and especially the policy makers to have the gonads to put in place, to take the policy decisions to make this happen. If not, we just keep on spending money and just twisting and turning clean clothing in dirty waters. And it's not going to get us anywhere. So if we are serious about making the change, because it is costing us too much, and the interventions that has to be made is far less costly than the cost we have to pay in correcting those deficiencies and the outcome of not doing anything and allowing everything to prevail the way it is. So this year, I'm going to close again too, asking you, every one of us, to make this our resolution to decrease the amount or the intake of sugars, salts, and preservatives, and that the reduction of ingredients in the foods that are presented to us should be taken down to the minimum acceptable levels, people. And that is not too difficult to ask, and if we can do so, there will be so much more available for spending into all other areas. The economic activity in here can skyrocket. The monies are going to be spent here. We can have our farmers producing at the levels which they used to produce before. The quantities, most times they can't produce because the demands are low. The amount that they can produce is so high that persons cannot access it either. So it's a collective effort, and like I said, adopting the One Health perspective will allow us to address the issue of food security, being able to sustain and modify our health status in a manner that is more productive, and every segment of the value chain in there, from production to consumption, can be enhanced, and we can collectively find a way to reduce the prevalence level of those diseases that is destroying our country by the minute. Okay, so I want to thank those of you who was able to view this program for the year, and I'm hoping that you took stock or is taking stock to make this one of all your resolution for the new year. If we can do that, we will be at a better place next year at that same time. If we don't, we will be at a worse place next year at that same time. So, and it's ours to take where we would want to be next year at the same time. So if it's fine that we are not in a positive place, again too, that is left for us to make that decision. If we want to be in a worse place, and again, that is left for us to make that decision. Yes, but we have the opportunity to change it, and we can do so if we address it as a collective to bring about that meaningful change that could make so much an impact in so many different aspects of our lives. So, with this, again, I want to wish all of you a happy and prosperous Christmas and 2025. And again, too, we can make it prosperous if we make that resolution. Yes, and we need to enforce our policymakers to take those hard decisions because it's the benefit of all of us. And those of you who have been with us throughout the year and years on that program, we want to and take an opportunity on behalf of the management of staff at DBS, the Veterinary Medical Center, and our family, friends, to wish all of you happy and hearty, prosperous 2025. Bonsoir, good evening, buenas noches.